Hey everyone, FusedVR coming at ya. A couple weeks back, someone on Discord, and I can't find it for the life of me right now, but they'd sent me a link on this program that Binance is running called the Binance Most Valuable Builder program, and this is kind of their fourth season of that, where they're looking into, I think, concepts around the metaverse and blockchain, which I think is exactly what we've been kind of really focusing on here on the channel, which looks pretty interesting. I'll leave a link to that down in the description below if anyone wants to check it out. And I think there are two kind of key categories that they're really diving into. The first one is around this whole concept of GameFi, SocialFi, and MetaFi, which are really buzzwordy terms. I don't really know what they mean, to be honest, and I think just play to earn games as in of itself take a lot of understanding to really wrap your head around, and I don't think we need more terms that add a bit more confusion to the whole space. But I think they're trying to go off of this whole concept of DeFi, which that I'm pretty bullish on, decentralized finance, because I think it's a practical use case with some practical applications that exist out there that really make the banking system obsolete in a trustless, secure way that bring finance into people's hands, which I think is incredibly important. That aside, that's kind of one key area that they're looking to invest in. The second area, which is where I want to dive a little bit more deeper into, and I think is interesting, is this concept of bridging between Web 2 and Web 3. I mean, if you look at our good old-fashioned logo, right? That whole concept of bridging with Web 3 at the end and moving kind of within the whole ecosystem of the web, I think is incredibly important. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time kind of defining kind of the differences between all of the different kind of web numbers, if you will, in this video, and just kind of give my take and thoughts around where we are today and where Web 3 will hopefully end up taking us. I think it might be helpful to just kind of start from Web 1 and work our way up the chain. So Web 1 was basically the foundation of the internet, and it was basically a read-only version and static content. So what does that mean? You would go to a web server, you could type in IP address, you could type in a domain name after the DNS system was invented, and you would go to that site, and that would send you back read-only content. So very useful for, say, trying to learn more about a specific topic, kind of like a book, right? But it's completely read-only. And the model, right, is that you would have one person who could access many different sites, and everything would be read-only. And that's kind of the Web 1 model, and that's we still have a lot of that today, right? Because fundamentally, there are plenty of sites that are out there that are really intended to be read-only. And then kind of around 2005-ish, you have the transition to Web 2, which is kind of how do we make websites more interactive and engageable, and basically having that ability to write your content onto a website and go back and forth. That's what Web 2 is. And so that kind of correlates to the rise of social media and allows basically kind of for a model where many people can engage together on one site as opposed to kind of going back and forth through multiple different sites. And that, of course, then encapsulates all of the players in that space, which is like your Facebooks, Twitters, and social media in general. So that's Web 2, and that's basically where we are today. Of course, nothing in this model is necessarily claiming that things need to be decentralized or centralized, right? But fundamentally what has happened, of course, as the internet has evolved over the last, say, 20 years, we've seen kind of big companies form and create these kind of giant data centers, giant platforms that you typically only end up going to a handful of websites. And moreover, these handful of websites run data centers like Amazon, for example, that many people use as the backbone for their own websites, leading to kind of centralized control over a lot of the web in that regard. Depending on your point of view, that may or may not be a bad thing. It's just something that has happened. So then Web 3 is this kind of new concept that's on the block. And I think when we say that Web 1 is many sites to one user, then Web 2 is one site to many users. Web 3 is trying to be this concept of many sites for many users. So really kind of this whole concept of decentralization and blockchain and having kind of a pseudo identity that you can kind of take between different sites and have it all be kind of a consistent homogeneous experience. And I think an easier way to maybe explain that is also in the fact that with Web3, if let's take kind of IPFS as an example, right? I could host a website on something like the interplanetary file system, which is basically a decentralized data storage for files. And I could put my HTML page on this IPFS blockchain, if you will. And then if I ping a given address, IPFS will find where my content is on this decentralized storage, serve that up to me from the closest storage, and also move that storage over kind of closer to me. It acts as this decentralized network in some degree where everyone can contribute and be a part of the network, be incentivized to be part of the network, but the compute and the storage of it is not owned by one entity, which is fundamentally, I think, really the original intent behind the internet is not really to have centralized stores of power for computation, but rather a decentralized homogeneous body. So that really is what I think the intent of Web3 is. And a lot of that I feel like gets a little bit confused in the whole concepts of people really focusing on just one aspect of the technology, like whether that be NFTs, whether that be DeFi, whether that be you name it, right? And then they form their opinion on everything based on that. But really, I think the whole point of Web3 is just kind of trying to create an incentive structure to make it easier for everyone to actually contribute to a network that everyone can be a part of. And I think that's what's really interesting about it. And going back to, I think what was really interesting about what was in that kind of initial kickoff article that Binance had put out about Web3, I think they recognized that a lot of the internet is going to continue to be on Web 2, and there just needs to be kind of a transition point and an incentive structure, right, to bring Web 3 into kind of more and more applications. And I think the other thing to keep in mind, right, is I think there are just layers, but they're not replacements. So when we say that Web 2 kind of started to emerge in 2005, it didn't replace Web 1. In fact, like from a practical standpoint, the FusedVR website today, right now, is pretty much a static website to some degree. And it's basically a Web 1 website, and there are plenty of Web 1 websites that are out there. So it's not that Web 2 replaced Web 1, it's just that it offered a different user experience. But if you don't need that user experience when it comes to interactivity, there's still plenty of value in having a read-only website. So that is, I think, kind of the important part of this model, is that it's not a replacement, right? Web 3 is not really intended to replace Web 2. Google and Facebook, at least in the short term, are not going anywhere. And so in that capacity, it's really just kind of enabling a new set of technologies and use cases. I mean, like I said at the beginning of the video, I think DeFi is absolutely amazing and is insanely powerful as a concept for really enabling people to have the freedom to do what they want with their finances without being stuck within the banking system. So I just kind of wanted to use that article as basically a kickoff for explaining kind of those high level concepts in a little bit more detail. I think it gets very confusing with all of the buzzwords that are out there, as I kind of complained about at the beginning of this video. But I think when you look at it kind of from a macro perspective, it's just another tool in a toolkit. And as a result, there's probably a lot of really dumb things that are going to be built with it, but there's also going to be a small percentage of projects and use cases and applications that will really enable, I think, finance in my mind in a way that we haven't really seen before. And I think also ownership in a way that we've never really seen before. And I think that's where things get really, really exciting. So hopefully you found some part of this video useful. Let me know if there was anything particular down in the comments below, but otherwise I'm going to wrap this up for now. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. This has been FusedMan, and I'm signing out.